Hey, good afternoon. It's 4:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Luke Rosiak will join us this hour from the Daily Wire. Mark Hemingway is here from Real Clear Investigations at 5 o'clock. And Corey and Ganamort, heard of him? He joins me at 5:30 today. A lot to talk about with him. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump said this week he thinks that mean Al Green is a moron. President Trump telling Fox News yesterday that Congressman Al Green, who disrupted the joint address to Congress, waving his cane around, Mr. Green with a cane on the House floor. President Trump said he's an embarrassment to Democrats. He should be forced to take an IQ test. Al Green's been trying to explain himself. He's got explanations for this. And he wants you to know, he talked to TMZ, of course, because that's where you would go after you're censured by the United States House of Representatives, to explain why he was so disruptive on the House floor.
The president that evening called the Democratic members of Congress lunatics on national TV. The president called them lunatics. He did so, and he has not been reprimanded.
Well, you were a lunatic. You were acting like a complete lunatic.
He won't be censured. He uses incivility to take advantage of our civility.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was walking out because I didn't want to suffer the incivility of the president.
Silliness, of course. Trump was the one who was composed. It was Al Green who was emotionally incontinent on the House floor, acting like a crazy person. That's not the only very serious journalism endeavor that he engaged in, TMZ. He also spoke to the Breakfast Club this morning, and he said that the reason that he was censured is because racism.
There is invidious discrimination in the House of Representatives. I'm a son of the segregated South. The rights that the Constitution recognized for me, my friends and neighbors denied. I had to sit in the back of the bus, the balcony of the movie, drink from a colored water fountain, and my relatives who committed some crimes.
This is so crazy. So he gets to disrupt the speech of the President of the United States because of what exactly? And there will never be any consequences for bad behavior because of that would be racist?
We're locked up in the bottom of the jail. I know what invidious discrimination looks like. The Klan burned a cross in my yard.
Oh, my goodness.
I know what it smells like. I was in filthy waiting rooms, and I've been in places where I didn't want to be, and I know what it sounds like. I've been called all kinds of ugly names. So I know
I've been in places I don't want to be.
And when the speaker decided that I would be removed, and then there was this motion, this resolution to censure me, it became obvious to me that I was not being treated as others were.
How did he become the victim of this story? What an amazing turn.
And candidly speaking, it is invidious discrimination, harmful discrimination.
He just keeps repeating the word invidious discrimination. He's hoping that he can make it true. If he says it often enough, we'll just will it into existence. Yeah, he wasn't the only Democrat who acted like a complete lunatic on the floor of the House, although he was the most theatrical. Yeah, a lot of them, they were putting up little signs and disrupting and walking out and making all sorts of noise. And they refused. The only time they didn't stand up is when something good was happening. If President Trump was honoring a kid with cancer or was honoring a family who had lost a loved one to some horrific crime, they didn't stand. They just sat there on their hands, didn't want to give any support to these Americans who have either been struggling or have overcome something difficult. And Fox News, they sent a reporter called Johnny. He works for Jessie Waters. They sent a reporter out to talk to all these guys, and it is it's so laugh out loud funny. He just keeps putting microphones in their faces and asking why it is that they couldn't just be normal human beings. This one starts with Elizabeth Warren.
Senator, how's it going? Johnny from Fox. What could Donald Trump do that'll make you clap?
Thank you very much.
What could Donald Trump do that'll make you clap?
I did clap when he said that the United States had supported Ukraine and given them lots of
Well, why not for Laken Riley's mom?
Okay, so the Elizabeth Warren thing is really funny because, of course, that the only time that she clapped was when President Trump called her out for giving endless amounts of money to Ukraine that's led to endless death without any end in sight.
Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
one of the great owns of the night. Again, that speech, just sped by for me. I don't know how it was 2 hours long. It felt like it was a blink. It was so good. Here's more. John Fetterman talks to the Fox News reporter.
How was that speech last night? Did you love it?
Well, I watched it. I don't think that was the best look for our party last night.
Very disappointing.
Cory Booker.
So you didn't stand up for anything?
The president got before the American people, didn't talk about how he could drive down grocery prices.
Senator, why weren't you standing yesterday for anything?
Klobuchar.
Important hearing right now on anti-Semitism.
But you didn't stand for anything at the speech last
I don't know
night.
what you're talking about, where you got that information.
What kind of research did he need to do to get that information? He looked at the cameras. He saw the image of the speech. I don't know what you did to get this information. Senator, it wasn't a secret. You were on national television. There was a camera pointed at you. You weren't standing at all. Here is Senator Adam Schiff, who, by the way, did you know that he has some sort of podcast now? Have you seen these clips going around? He has a podcast. He's holding these. What is it with all these people holding tiny microphones? I don't know who convinced them that this was a good idea. He's holding a tiny microphone up to his face, to his gigantic watermelon head. He's holding a tiny microphone in his pencil neck. And he's doing a podcast now. And I don't know what they're calling this, but I do have a recommendation. They should call it The Schiff Show. Don't you think? Like, if you're going to call it anything, it's a total Schiff Show with Adam Schiff. Here he is, speaking of Fox.
There was nothing the president had to say.
Lincoln Riley's mom. You didn't stand for her.
Factual or truthful or anything like that.
He just drifts away. I love this. So the senators, they'll get to a door, and they know the reporter can't keep following, so they'll just quietly disappear from they'll just disappear. Like, you can't even hear anything that he's saying. But Johnny says, well, you didn't even stand for Lincoln Riley's mom. And he just keeps blabbering. Adam Schiff does, and he disappears through a door. Here is Richard Blumenthal, who lied about going to Vietnam.
We applauded.
You don't think it's worthy to stand up for her like everyone else?
We should applaud.
I need you to move.
Congressman.
Oh, and this is great. Ilhan Omar, Johnny finds Ilhan Omar, and Ilhan keeps shoving Johnny. Literally pushing. Now, if this was reversed and it was a Republican shoving a Democrat, we'd have a full-blown news cycle about, Republican lawmaker assaults reporter. But that's not what happened here. It's just Johnny with his microphone trying to interview Ilhan Omar as she's getting onto an elevator. And because his microphone keeps interrupting the elevator's closing function, it's like catching the actual lasers or something. She goes, I need you to move. And she starts shoving him.
I need you to move.
Congressman, why didn't you stand for the speech?
Have a good day. I need to go to a meeting.
80% of the Americans.
And she shoves him. Oh, these Democrats are the best. And by that, I mean the worst. So anyway, there's a lot more audio there, but that was really funny. So I hope we get a lot more of that. I love Fox has a couple of good reporters. Johnny's doing that. Daily Caller has a bunch of good reporters who are all over the Hill capturing a lot of this video, who I get to work with at the Daily Caller. And I love what they're doing, just asking all these Democrats to account for themselves. And they just go running in fear from the microphones. It's called journalism. Just answer a couple of questions. Let us see here. I've got a couple of calls coming in. Mark is calling in from Manassas now, line 2. Hello, Mark. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, good afternoon, brother. Hey, I got to tell you, man, I think I speak for millions of people in the DMV here when I say that I am extremely happy for you and your family on this quote-unquote promotion and moving into the Limbaugh time slot. But for all of us schleps that do the 9 to 5 and have had the pleasure listening to you in the morning and then in the afternoon with your insight and shepherding us through the daily news and the current events with both your wisdom and your wit. It's going to be a loss for us, brother. We're both bummed and excited at the same time, man. Couldn't happen to a better dude. Well earned, my friend. Well earned.
Well, Mark, thank you for that. It means a lot to me. And as far as what is possible here, we are producing a podcast every day. Dan Bongino has really done me a great favor in giving me the most unfair head start you can possibly imagine with a podcast, because he's got this massive, massive audience of millions of people who already follow that podcast. And on Rumble, they have, I want to say right now, I haven't looked today, but it's about 3.5 million subscribers who follow that thing. And so every day it gets turned into a pretty rapid fire podcast that you can consume. So there's an option for you if you want to hear me. If you miss me in the middle of the day because you're at work, we've got some options here. And of course, you will be able to hear me 12 to 3 every single day, still here on WMAL. So I can't thank you enough, Mark. That's a really nice compliment. And there are going to be ways for you to hear me. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm sure even a troglodyte like me will be able to figure out how to listen to a podcast, brother. So, again, good luck, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate that. Steve is calling in from Purcellville now, line 5. Hello, Steve. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince. Thanks for taking my call. Long-time listener and first-time caller. Say, listen, kind of Mark was my lead man. He kind of took things that I was going to say. We're going to miss you. If you can, try to keep us in Loudoun County informed with the school boards and Buddha Biberide and those kind of things. We really appreciate it. But I want to leave you with, I think it was your first week when you were on the afternoon. A caller called in. He wanted to know what happened with Mary Walters.
Yeah.
And you were about to tell him where she was going. And then all of a sudden he started rattling on, started dissing on your agenda and stuff. And eventually you just decided, you know what, I'm not going to tell you what happened to Mary. And you hung up. So I thought it was a great way to handle that guy. But again, thank you very much for everything you've done. We all appreciate it.
Thank you for that. And I hope at some point I actually answered that question. Mary is in New Jersey. That's where she lives. And she's a great woman. And I've been talking to her this very week about everything that's going on. She's just a wonderful human being. And it was such a pleasure to work alongside her in the mornings here on WMAL. So we've had this is a great station. And if you can believe it, and for those of you who've been longtime listeners of WMAL, you know this very well. This year is the 100th anniversary of this station, WMAL, which I think is coming up in the fall here. So this is the centennial of this mighty, legendary station. And I am over the moon that I get to be even a small part of it. So thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Our pleasure. And best of luck.
Thank you very, very much. All right. All right, let's take a call from John. He's calling in from Lanham, Maryland, now on line 2. Hello, John. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Hey there. I'm glad you are.
Yeah, I was just calling in because I was just telling you a call, Taker, that I'm actually retired from the federal government. But what I was curious about is if anybody's gone back and looked at any of the media coverage of when Clinton laid off what was like 300,000 federal workers. And I just thought it would be kind of interesting to go back and look at the media coverage of that, the way they're covering, like it's such a disaster that people are losing their jobs, which is, I've lost jobs. I worked for a place for 15 years. I was in business for over 100 years, and they closed down. So, I can sympathize with them, but it's like every time I lost a job, the good Lord opened another door for me, and it actually was better. Every time that I lost a job, Jesus was there, and I got a better one and better benefits, better money. So you just have to keep a positive attitude and know that, as long as you have your faith, that's what will get you through.
That's critical. What you're describing is absolutely critical. Always remember the bigger picture. And you're right. President Clinton oversaw 377,000 federal job reduction. What President Trump is talking about is actually not even that high, relatively, in absolute terms, because President Trump wants to bring down about 10% of the federal workforce. That'd be about 300,000 federal jobs. And that was a Democrat, Bill Clinton, who famously declared that the era of big government is over. And and even if we don't, pull up every headline and every news clip from that time that we can get our hands on, you and I both know that the way that President Trump is covered by the American media now is at an absurd degree of hysteria for every step and action he takes. And he was elected on this basis. This was not a secret. President Trump ran on this cost-cutting initiative, on right-sizing the federal government, shrinking it down to size. And he was elected on that basis. So it is a little bit over the top for the media to all of a sudden be throwing a hissy fit in light of the fact that everyone knew this was coming.
Yeah, and I think the local governments, suing because they're saying he should have given them more notice or whatever. Well, it's like, you ever prepare for the future? I mean, it's like not putting anything away for a rainy day.
Yeah.
As all of a sudden it's like, oh no, what are we going to do now? We have to pay unemployment. Well, every business pays into unemployment, so you should have the money there. You should have prepared for in case something goes wrong. I mean, use some of the gambling money.
Yeah, well, this is just the way Washington is for sure, because it's become so accustomed to being larded up and never scrutinized that they figured, why prepare for anything else? It's just going to always keep going. And right now, President Trump is trying to change the pace there. Thank you, John. No, it's a good reminder, of course. Keep it in context.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 377,000 federal jobs cut under Bill Clinton. And that guy got away with everything. Everything. Yeah. All right. Okay, coming up, Luke Rosiak will be with us. He's going to talk to us about a Kamala Harris aide who apparently is now under DOJ investigation in the Trump era for doing something very naughty. We'll talk to Luke about it. It's ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Good afternoon. 4:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Mark Hemingway joins us at 5 o'clock. Corey and Ganamore joins us at 5:30, and you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The Biden-Harris administration, in one of its last acts, in addition to offering pardons to the entirety of Joe Biden's family, attempted apparently to burrow a political staffer into the Trump administration who, when he was discovered, allegedly attempted to steal a whole bunch of taxpayer money. For more on this wild story, Luke Rosiak joins us now. He's an investigative reporter for the Daily Wire and the author of the book Race to the Bottom, Uncovering the Secret Forces Destroying American Public Education. Luke, great to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Tell me about this Kamala Harris aide. Who is he, and what did the Biden administration attempt to do with him?
It really is a wild story. This is a guy named Nathaniel Siegel, who was a deputy domestic policy advisor to Kamala Harris. He also previously served in the Obama administration. And so he's working in the White House. And then on January 18th, about 48 hours before Trump was sworn into office, they put him on the payroll of the Federal Trade Commission as its deputy chief technology officer. And, he had kind of not even doing technology stuff for the White House, but somehow he becomes deputy CTO. Now, they hired him without his personnel file. The personnel file would have shown that he's a political appointee. He should not be hired into a career job. And they did all kinds of suspicious things to put him on the payroll as not a probationary employee, but sort of just a normal career tenured employee. And they basically they start to catch on to this scheme. The Trump administration starts figuring out, like, what the heck is going on? How did this guy get hired? His paperwork isn't right at all. He starts realizing, oh man, they're going to make me a probationary employee, which I should be, and then they're probably going to fire me because the Trump administration is getting rid of a lot of probationary employees.
Yeah.
So he basically figures out the jig is up and decides to say, actually, you know what? I already took the Musk buyout. And so he allegedly backdated and doctored an email screenshot to try to convince the FTC that he was entitled to this money, which could be like $200,000 from the Office of Personnel Management. So it's almost like one of Kamala's top aides is like, I'm not going to leave the government unless you pay me $200,000. And it's like, wait a minute, Kamala isn't vice president anymore, so you are going to leave the government.
So, okay, so I'm looking at the dates here. You had to, if you were one of these employees who received the fork in the road email, you had until February 10th to indicate that you would resign. It was 4 days later, February 14th, that the Human Resources Department called this guy and said, hey, we're classifying you as a probationary employee, just so you know. And he responds with, no, I already took the buyout. And they said, really? You took the buyout? Do you have proof of that? And he goes, yeah. And so he sends along a phony email, allegedly, indicating that he had taken the buyout, that he had sent resign by February 10th. But how do we know that that was a fake email, that he didn't actually ever send something like that?
Well, he sent a screenshot, and then they asked for the real email, and he wouldn't send it. And then they checked their servers, and they were like, this email, there's no record of this email being sent from our servers. And OPM also said, yeah, we never received such an email. But also, he wasn't eligible for the buyout. He never even received the offer. So this is like, he was a probationary employee. They're not going to pay you 8 months of salary to leave when you're a brand new probationary employee. And the only reason, basically, what's especially interesting here is the way they had him in those books to enable him to do this. He didn't do that on his own. He's not able to hire himself. And so Lena Khan, who was Biden's head of the Federal Trade Commission, actually explicitly ordered her staff to put this guy on the payroll on January 18th, despite all kinds of red flags and indications that he was being improperly recorded. And so this is, burrowing, as you said, but sort of an especially duplicitous form. And really, there's a criminal investigation going on to this guy. I think it's pretty likely that it'll result in criminal charges. But it also could implicate Lena Khan and potentially even Kamala Harris herself, because there was a number of moves preceding like that. They basically did like this multi-step scheme to try to sneak this guy in. And it really, Kamala Harris is one of the only people who's empowered to move people around among her top staff into different roles.
Does the Trump administration believe that there are more people who are like this, that it's not just this one guy at the FTC, but that instead the Biden administration attempted to burrow their own activists inside of other agencies?
Oh, they definitely have. I've written about a couple different cases where they also used loopholes to avoid it, and the House Oversight Committee is doing an investigation based in part on those stories. They're certainly going to find additional examples. I think this was fairly widespread. Now, the Office of Personnel Management is supposed to have to approve it and only do so in limited cases. The reason is pretty obvious. When you're taking political appointees and making them career in the waning days of an administration, number one, you're taking jobs away from the precious civil servants who are supposed to be getting them based on merit. You're using your connections to basically steal the job from somebody else. But you're also obviously undermining, you're potentially going to be able to undermine the next administration, which is probably why they're doing this in the first place. And you're also you're diminishing public trust in the civil service. And so when people, they can no longer lash out at Trump for saying he's a conspiracy theorist, for suggesting that there's a deep state or that the civil service is not sufficiently, that the civil service is trying to undermine them, when they did that. The Biden administration is, kind of responsible here for, if Trump has reservations about the civil service, then maybe don't sneak Kamala Harris's top advisor into a so-called career role on January 18th.
Well, exactly right. And the whole point of civil service protections is to keep them from becoming political. It's designed to be like, look, there's a steady class of workers that aren't specifically loyal, or they're not supposed to be, to any particular political party. It used to be in American history there was a lot more patronage, that government jobs were handed out on the basis of who won the election, and then everyone else got fired. The civil service as it exists now is supposed to be insulated from that. But if you're installing political operatives and then giving them civil service protections in so doing, that's about as corrupt as it gets, because then you're actually giving additional protections to the people who are only there by way of patronage.
Yeah, that's right. And it's really insanely dishonest if the allegations are true that the federal prosecutors are looking at. This guy is, taking a buyout that he clearly wasn't entitled to and falsifying documents to do it, lying, scheming, changing paperwork, coordinating with others to do all the paperwork that led to this. And this is a guy that was in the Obama administration. He's a top Harris person. He went to 3 Ivy League schools. Granted, at Yale, he majored in ethnicity, race, and migration. So I don't know how much that counts for, but he's got quite a resume. He was working in finance, and now you kind of wonder what else was this guy involved in, that if he just feels like it's okay to just kind of make fake documents to potentially steal $200,000. But it also gets to this idea that saying Trump isn't going to relinquish power, he's going to become a dictator. These people were like, well, we lost an election, our term is up on January 20th, but we're just going to stay. We're just going to stay, and we're going to fake paperwork if we have to do so. And if you want us to leave, the election isn't enough. You're going to have to pay us cash as well.
Yeah. But also, if he served in the Obama administration, we're not talking about like a frat bro or some kid who just got a job for the first time in the government. This is an adult man who's been around for a long time, and he went to Ivy League schools, not a dummy. Despite how dumb one of his majors might be. So this consciousness of guilt seems pretty obvious if these things prove to be true.
Well, yeah, and in fact, they called him in. He emailed them, being like, "Can I get that money now? I haven't heard anything in a while." And they're like, "Yeah, come talk to us tomorrow." And they gave him they invited him to a meeting, and there was a top lawyer scheduled to be at the meeting. And when he realized the lawyer was going to be there, he just quit on his own. So
this is like To Catch a Predator. They invite him in the room. There's like cameras everywhere, and he's like just there to confess. That's
Definitely
crazy.
Seems to be some consciousness of guilt. But yeah, no, I mean, in some of the other examples of burrowing that I've uncovered, they did the same thing where they're trying to avoid the OPM sign off by doing these sketchy things like using what they call term appointments, basically using all kinds of loopholes. And I think there's consciousness of guilt there. I mean, they weren't saying like, we have justification for doing this. They're like, we're going to hide it, and we're going to put our top people into these federal agencies in career roles. And in two of the other borrowers that I found, they actually had previously worked at the White House Personnel Office, which is like the nerve center of like putting political cronies across the government. So it's like, it's not coincidental. It was like, it couldn't be more blatant what they were doing.
Yeah, it is amazing. I'm always so impressed by your ability to not only to dig into these things, but to package them in such a way that the rest of us can understand them. Luke Rosiak, please keep up the great work for the Daily Wire. Always so good to talk to you, sir.
Great talking to you, Vince.
Thank you very much. That's Luke Rosiak, digging in here, trying to detect the fraud. As you've got people burrowing in from the Biden era and attempting to stay unnoticed, and in some cases doing it hilariously poorly. Let us see here. Steve is calling in from Leesburg now. Is on line 1. Hello, Steve. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for taking Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I'm waiting for somebody to address the elephant in the room with respect to the federal workforce. Nobody seems to want to mention the fact that we went from 800,000 federal workers to almost 3 million in the last 5 years.
Is it that much? 800,000 was at the top of the Biden administration?
Yeah, in 2019, it was 800,000. And in January 1st of this year, it was almost 3 million.
I'll double check the numbers to see how right you are about this. Although I do see, according to the magazine Government Executive, they say that Biden oversaw a nearly 6% growth of full-time non-seasonal federal workforce.
That is a 100% lie. That needs to be looked into, but that's why Doge is doing what they're doing. They need to. Whoever was controlling the Biden regime was hell bent on turning us into a communist country by, consolidating all of the federal power there in D.C. And it was disgusting. And I just don't see anybody talking about it. It's crazy.
Well, there's no question that. So here's a good piece of information. Let's see. March of 2020, the federal workforce stood at 1.9 million. So there you go. That's not a tripling, but that's a 50% increase from that time frame.
What year was that?
That was March of 2020.
Yeah, 2020. So from 19 to 2024, it tripled. So in 20, that's about half, right? It doubled then. Mm-hmm. Now another 2 years later, it doubled again. So that was all under Biden.
Yeah, well, yeah, and look, here's the deal. Regardless of what the specific number is and how much it grew percentage-wise, there is absolutely no question that Biden was using government jobs to try and diminish the impact of the unemployment numbers. They were padding the employment numbers with all sorts of government hiring, which is a really bad thing to do economically 100%. Because these are not. Yeah, they're not productive jobs. They don't actually stimulate the economy. They just take from it.
Exactly. Anyway, thanks for taking my call. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, my pleasure, Steve. Steve's on the right track. It's an important topic. Let me see. I've got Carlo calling in from Arlington now on line 4. Carlo, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. I'm a proud member of the Bongino Army, and I'm a big fan of yours. And when Dan said he was looking for a replacement, I mean, he's a super honest guy and a really good guy. So I was curious about who he would pick. And when he picked you, I was thrilled. I mean, I'm thrilled. This is great.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And one more thing. When Biden was taking heat about the border, he said that Congress had to pass new legislation, which, of course, wasn't true. And, of course, President Trump right now has control of the border But President Trump or nobody else is even mentioning when in President Trump's first term, he controlled the border with the existing legislation. So all that was a lie, about what Biden said. And Democrats, they fall for it.
You heard President Trump earlier this week say that point, right? That all it took was a new president.
Exactly. Yeah. But he didn't even mention that in his first term he controlled the border too. But nobody wants to speak about that. But it's true. I mean,
let me. I'll say there is one point that you and I both remember very well when he was talking about how much control he had over the border. That was July 13th of last year. Remember that? The moment the assassin shot him, he was pointing at a chart that made the very point you are making now. He was that chart saved his life, in fact. And now he's back,
it did.
bringing everything down to new record lows.
And I mean, I'm a Christian like you are, and President Trump said God spared him for a reason, and I believe that 100%.
Me too.
Absolutely.
Me too. I see the hand of God in that for sure. Thank you, Carlo. I appreciate that, sir.
All right, brother. You take care.
All right, let's see. I got Rick in Reston, line 2. Hello, Rick. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call, and at this point, belated congratulations on your move. That's really fantastic to hear.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, I wanted to continue on the thing about the size of the federal civilian workforce. I retired about a year ago from the senior executive service here in the area, and what I really want to see the administration do is put some simple charts up on 5-year increments that show the size of the federal workforce. And don't forget the contractors, not just contractors who are like replacing windows of a building, but the ones that are actually butts in seats at federal office buildings.
Right.
Because the workforce has ballooned, and the American people need to understand that. So, these tales of woe of people losing their jobs, they're real. If you're an 18-month employee starting off your career and you just lost your job, that's a real bummer, right? But the people need to understand that it is simply ballooned. There are just so many more employees than we need to get the job done.
Yeah, and every federal employee that you talk to with their wits about them says that. They look around them and they're like, man, there's all sorts of people here who should not be here, and I don't even know what that person does, and this zombie program has continued forever, and then people are told to, like, hey, keep your head down, don't draw attention to this program. It's generating all sorts of money, and let's just not. We don't have to do much to service it, or don't complete it too quickly. That's one of the crazy ones. Is like when you're told, hey, don't finish this too quickly because the contract is supposed to last this long. There's all sorts of deep inefficiencies in the way the government spends our money, isn't there?
And 100%, if I can add one more point on the budgetary issue, every employee who's been with the government more than a few years, especially if you've been in any kind of management, understands the end of the year budget, get it spent now thing. So I understand we've got, constitutional debates about whether impoundment is proper or not, but what's happened is we're just constantly spending the last 10 or 12% of a budget, like a month and a half's worth of money on crap, unnecessary purchases at the end of the year. And it's gone on that way for my entire career, which is 28 years now.
The Veterans Affairs Department is reporting today that they have plants, a couple of house plants that they have in the building. They have contracts to water them for $1,400 a year each. Each plant, $1,400 to keep it watered. Yeah, I think the government's inefficient. I think we may be understating that. Coming up, we're going to be joined by our good friend Mark Hemingway. He's coming in. Corey and Gannemort is here on the Vince Coglianese Show.